This is the Storied Outdoors, a podcast somewhere between Lewis and Tolkien and Lewis and Clark, finding clarity in the stories we tell and the adventures that shape us. Welcome to the Storied Outdoors. My name is Brad Hill, and I'm joined as always by my good friend and co-host Brian Gill. And we have a special day today as we were recording with a couple of good friends of mine, dear friends of mine, and a trip that I got to be on alongside these guys out in Wyoming. We're joined today by Chase Bowers, who's been on the show before and written a wonderful essay for our summer series this past summer. Chase has joined us before, and so we got Chase with us, and then new to the show, first-time listener. What is it? First-time caller, long-time listener. Remember that? Anybody
Right.
from you guys know?
Oh, yeah.
You guys know. Josh Farmer. Josh is a dear friend of mine, longtime friend of mine from college. He's in my small group, but also works for Compassion International. And I got an invite again to go out to Wyoming to the Refuge with a bunch of pastors on a pastor's retreat hosted by Compassion International. And just thankful for the opportunity to be a part of that and to be invited into that group. And this time I got to invite my pal Chase along for this retreat, and a fellow pastor, fellow missions pastor, passionate about the mission work and hearing more about Compassion, but also an opportunity to go on a bona fide retreat where we get away in the middle of nowhere. I mean, most everything in Wyoming is in the middle of nowhere. Let's just be honest. But this place is genuinely in the middle of nowhere, like 9 miles down, I think, or 7 or 9 miles down a dirt road off of some little 2-lane highway with no speed limit, but a lot of speed goats, if you will. Strewn all across Wyoming. If you know what a speed goat is, just Google it, man. You'll see those things. I saw a video of one of those things doing like 50 miles an hour down the road the other day. Some guy was driving next to one, and that little thing was cooking. But we're out in Wyoming. We're at the Refuge. We're at the Water Valley Ranch, a 100-year-old ranch. I think they said John Wayne had stayed there at some point in time in the past. But just whatever you think of when you think ranch, this is the place. Log cabin. There's taxidermy everywhere. There's, leather chairs and leather-bound books and rich mahogany. There's pool tables and, man, there's beverages and food. Some of the best food I've ever had. And it was a great time of fellowship. The weather is spectacular. I mean, it is cool enough. We're in the summertime, but we're in Wyoming. We're several thousand feet above sea level, which is pretty tough on the Flatlander down here at sea level. But it was great, and man, I was excited to share that time with these guys. So, welcome to the show, Chase and Josh. I'm thankful you're here.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Honored to be here. Appreciate it.
Josh, this is the first time I've ever met you, so thank you for joining us on the show. I've heard a lot about you. Brad talks about you all the time. He speaks so highly of you and what the work you're doing with Compassion. And Chase, man, so good to see you again, buddy. It has been too long, and I'm still searching for those acres of fish that we have yet to find.
me too. We got closer in Wyoming than we did in Georgia, for sure. I'm still looking.
Man, hey, so let's talk real quickly about Chase's essay. Buddy, I could not read that thing without just crying my eyes out. It was so beautifully written. It was so touching, such a story of redemption and good fishing stories. And man, just a fantastic job, man. Great job. If you're listening and you haven't gone back and listened to that during the summer series, go listen to that one. That's a very, very well done essay. Thanks for sending that in, Chase.
Praise God. Thanks, man. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm just grateful to the Lord for the work that he's done and continues to do there in my family. And I was super excited for the opportunity to write.
Well, you knocked it out of the park, man. Thanks for doing such a great job.
Chase, there was one of the days that we were there fishing We went out, me, you, and another couple of guys went out, and we went on a pretty significant hike, and it was beautiful. I remember one of my favorite memories of that is you come up on that ridge away from the cabin. There's this lone, huge ponderosa pine, just kind of, it's all by itself sitting on the side of that mountain there, and and we walk right past it. As we get closer to it, it just looms larger and larger. But we passed it going out on the way on this very like narrow trail, very steep trail. We could see the river down to our left as we went out, and we fished a while, and it wasn't that great of a day. And then we started making our way back, and I distinctly remember you guys decided to try a different path. Big guy here I was tired. I was like, you know what? I'm not chancing it. I know I can get back this way. I'm going to go back this way. And so I made it back to the camp.
You stick to the old roads.
I stick to the old roads. And I make it back to the camp, and I get my waders off, and I'm drying out, and I'm eating a sandwich, and I got me my beverage, and I look up and I see Paul walking this way on this side of the river, holding his waders over his shoulders, soaking wet. And I was like, well, what'd you do with my friend? Where's my friend? Chase. Will you fill in the gaps of what happened between when you guys left me and I was eating my sandwich?
A decision was made here. I've got to know what happened.
Oh, yeah. So, we're going back on this ridge, and it's probably 100 feet above the river. And, Paul's old happy Paul just talk you into anything. He goes, hey, man, let's go down there. There's got to be fish down there. And, the river's running fast, and the guides have walked us past this area of the river, not fishing in it, but Paul is convinced. So I'm like, I'll go with him. And going down, it's an easy trek, because we're going down.
Always easy.
Walk some, slide some, right? And we get down, and we're just in a flat spot, and the river is rolling. And it's between, knee and hip deep, and it's tracking, and there's a lot more big rock than small rock. So it's hard to find your footing. But Paul's 6'4", I like to say I'm 5'9.25" with shoes on, right? And so Paul's big guy, taller, and he's moving faster than I am, and he gets past halfway, but he's kind of standing stuck, and I see Paul go down.
Water, and I think, in the waders.
Oh no, yeah, like he's soaked, like I experienced about 15 minutes into our Georgia trip, and the water's colder in Wyoming, right? So I watched and made sure Paul got to the bank on the other side, and I thought, I'm not doing this. So I try to climb back up this embankment, and I get about halfway up, and I see a deer trail. I can't get the rest of the way up, so I just start following this wildlife trail. And I mean, there's areas where I'm walking to slide. I have to throw my fly rod backwards across a little ridge and jump across it, and anything I can grab on, I will. I'm going up and down. I get stuck in one spot, and we're in the middle of Wyoming, and you're seeing taxidermy, and there's spots where I'm just going, hey, bear, and not really worried. And then there's spots where it just feels like there's a mountain lion staring at me.
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm in waders, and it's hot. And so I literally had to crawl under some underbrush. And when I crawled under, I could hear.
We're talking hands and knees here, or hands and knees?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And
what kind of trail was this again?
It was a wildlife trail, but the trail ran out.
Okay.
I mean, this is not where I wanted to be, right?
Oh, no.
I know there's a river. I know there's a cabin across it. But
even the deer were like, nope.
I'm lost. Well, here's the thing. I come up under this, and I hear there's been a mule deer doe right across the river from where we're staying.
Yeah, we've seen that thing all week, yeah.
And so I hear what I know is a doe kind of hissing or blowing. And I just start looking for her, and I saw her and just started walking toward her. And I'm hot. I've been at it for about 45 minutes. And so she finally pops up and takes off, and I see her, and I just start blazing then. It's golden. I realize, I'm not far from home. I get back there crossed back over the bridge and then went and found Paul and drowned him, you know.
No.
No, it was not his fault. I decided to go with him. It did not go well. So I went back to a great lunch and enjoyed lunch, a cool drink, and just kind of chilled out a little bit. And then went to this little honey hole with Brad, this little lake where we found some fish. It was a good time.
Oh man. Oh, the little upper lake. That was
Oh yeah.
just a pristine, beautiful little lake, slam full of little trout and some big trout. And then my favorite fish that we caught all week were those beautiful brook trout.
Yeah, man. Just the spots on those trout, the markings were so incredible. The red and the blue, and just all the layers on the fish were really amazing. And they were. There was the smallest of the three species, but they were gorgeous.
Jumping. I mean, that when we
Yeah.
joke about acres of bass, but this little pond was slam full of them, and they were just jumping everywhere. And man,
Popping. Yeah.
hitting dry flies. You can't get much.
Oh,
I don't know that you can get much better than a dry fly topwater hit on any fish, but it was pretty special.
No, we caught all three species there, and I had a day where we both had a day where we caught a couple, and then I had a day where I hammered them, and then the next day, man, was it a green drake? What was that you were hammering them on?
It was a green drake, man. We wiped the floor with
just
them.
Nail them. Yeah.
It was pretty incredible.
This is no joke. It looked like you caught 7 or 8 fish in like 45 minutes, an hour. I mean, it was amazing.
Those little fish were angry.
Yeah.
One of my, when I look back on for both of these guys, but for you, Chase, we went to, I guess it was your first one of the week. Or was it your first trout out of the river for the week?
My first trout out of the river. That's right. Yeah.
We went up to, there's a spot that we could walk to pretty easy from the shop, and I had, from the cabin, and I had caught one there that was what we like to call a long release. I hooked it pretty good and fought it for a little while, and then unhooked it downriver somewhere because that big fella turned downstream.
Yeah.
And took me with it. And I didn't go full Brad Pitt on it, going down the river, chasing it, losing my hat and everything. But man, it was a really great fish. And so, man, I had caught one and netted one earlier than that in that same spot. And I was like, man, this is a good spot. And so, got Chase there. And I don't know if it was the same fish, but man, you caught
a great fish. No way.
It was a good fish.
What I caught was a good fish, but I mean, what you had on was every bit of 20 inches easy. And I had time to get to you, I remember, and get the net. I mean, you're fighting it for a while, but what you had on was a big brown. I mean, when it came up top, you could see the curve in this fish. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, it stings a little, but
that's what keeps you coming back.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Well, what doesn't sting was getting to net, be the net man for you and be able to net that beautiful brown trout that you caught out of that spot too, man. That was awesome.
Well, you kind of walked me through. I really appreciated this because I fish warm water for bass and bluegill, and they're not quite as smart as trout, and so you kind of walked me through just the lanes to put the fly in, and with the river rolling, got me into some slower water, and sure enough, got on a nice little brown. That was a good fight. It was a whole lot of fun, beautiful fish, and I actually got a sticker the other day. Kind of got away. I'm gonna remember some of these species that I catch, and bow just like a picture I got of it, and it was so much fun, so exciting, and it was great to catch it. Of course, to have the experience with a really good friend is what makes it. That
Absolutely.
you were right there, and it was just such a super day, and in the middle of nowhere, like there's no distraction, there's nothing else going on. I mean, it was just such a great time.
Yeah, I've been working on my guide skills. Maybe one day I can retire and be a guide. That'd be awesome. The old Captain Redbeard, the tales of Captain Redbeard.
And as long as there's a Storied Outdoors discount for that, I'm down for it.
I'm hoping that there will be.
That's right. You got it. You got it. Talk about, we've caught fish and catching fish is fun, right? But talk about like this, maybe some more of the spiritual reflection on a week like that at the refuge.
Yeah, I mean, you had told me that it was in the middle of nowhere, and when we pulled up into the town of encampment, and the only establishment there is the Mangy Moose, I thought, oh yeah, this is going to be in the middle of nowhere, and so. I mean, you said it. We see these mountain goats going out, and it's however many miles. It's about 45 minutes of just slow going, and then you drop into this little valley, and it really is like a refuge. And there's no cell service, and their Wi-Fi is hidden, and so and my right as I'm getting in, my son's having a travel issue, and they were great, let me get on the phone, but then I was off the phone and making sure my son was going to make it to Rwanda okay, and he did. And then it was just like quiet. And so because it was refuge, I think I've told you this, Brad. I just took a different little piece every day of Psalm 46:1, and just would sit down and look at the mountains, listen to the stream, and write about how the Lord's my refuge and how He's my strength and how He's a present help in trouble. And then that last part, we will not fear. And so the whole weekend, I was either talking to people face to face or talking to no one. And there were just sometimes hours by yourself, a silence of just walking to a spot or walking from a spot. And in the middle of this beauty, remembering that there's a God who made this, and this is just one little spot of all these amazing places He's made. I came away really rested and with just a lot of wind in my sails.
Mm.
And it was a super time, and also the people we were talking to were like-minded people who've gone through some really similar things. And so kind of walked away going, well, either I'm not crazy, or if I am crazy, it's not because of this, and and just knowing they're good brothers, just doing the same work all over the world, all over our nation, and the work of Refuge, both to encourage pastors and then the young men and women who are serving and guiding and leading horse trips. I mean, just tremendous individuals, and you can see the character of Christ growing up in them. And we say a prayer at night, talk about things we're thinking through, learning during the day together, and then just a little discussion we had around what were like world class meals. I mean, sous vide brisket, prime rib. Like that was insane. It was just such good food. The whole time was
The
incredible.
man deep fried a prime rib
Yeah.
in a cast iron kettle, that a cauldron.
Yeah.
That's not a kettle. That's a straight cauldron
Yeah.
of oil on a pitchfork. It was unreal. It was unreal.
Yeah, if you've not tried deep fried prime rib, you
this is
should.
way past this is way past fondue. This is as
Yeah.
fun. This is as fondue as it gets, man.
Pitchfork fondue. That's what he called it, right? Yeah.
That story just kept getting manlier and manlier.
Oh yeah.
And then he put it on a pitchfork.
I have never felt more manly than that moment with it.
That was crazy. Yeah.
I mean, I've got that on video for this episode. I'll make sure we post that video so you can see those things going. We're not even remotely kidding. It was incredible.
No.
And then afterwards, he asked us. He had the audacity to ask us if we wanted a deep fried yeast roll the size of our head.
Do you even have to ask?
I mean, might as well.
Oh, why not?
Chase is over there. Chase has got a handful of Oreos and Twinkies. Like, hey, throw those in the fryer too. I've been to the Texas State Fair.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Oh man. Oh, that's so good. Well, Josh, man, you working for Compassion, you get to invite people to that trip. And, that's not the only place you guys go. You guys go other places and take pastors and love on pastors in other ways. You also take pastors on, those kind of started when we couldn't go to sites with Compassion, right? And so this is another way,
Sure.
like, what are ways that we can, continue to invest in pastors? And so you guys started taking them on trips like these. And so y'all do some other trips like these. What is it like for you to lead one of those trips, but to also take part and be, on one of those trips?
Yeah. Look, it's a dream job that I get to do, honestly, of the work of on two sides of it, like the releasing children from poverty, like the calling to serve kids that are marginalized, that have no hope. Like my calling has come from a lot of my own life and upbringing and brokenness there. And so it's a tremendous honor. At the same time, on this side, to serve pastors as a former youth pastor, and church work's not easy. Some guys have better seasons, great seasons, but inevitably, like there's hardships going to come, and whether you're dealing with just life with your people or difficult people in your church, like it's very difficult. And so I love that we get to serve the church. That I've tasked from leadership down to serve pastors, serve the church, help them connect with who God is, and really awesome places. So trips like this, it's a little surreal that I get to participate, that I get to invite pastors, treat them to such a unique experience. And then there's tension whenever I go to these trips because it's beautiful, it's fun, and it's enjoyable. But I tell my coworkers all the time, like we're always on when we're on those trips, and that's okay. That's my job is to be there to serve, and I did not have the success with the fish that you guys had. I mean, the first day was just blank, just nothing. Second day, did a little lake fishing or pond fishing, nothing. The pastor I was with, Brandon, he caught a lot of fish, which I'm grateful for. And then on the last day, the morning session just blanked. But Rick, who was I was going out with, he had not caught a fish all week either. And I just remember walking and one of those moments saying, Lord, I'm grateful to be here. It's been a wonderful week. I sure wish that Rick, I wish you'd bless Rick. Let him be able to catch that fish because it's for him. Like, Lord willing, I get to go back. Hopefully next summer I get to take more pastors back and experience again. And Brad, I know you've been twice, but for a lot of these guys, this will be the only time they get to go and experience something like this. And man, lo and behold, probably 20 minutes in, Rick hooked him and netted him a fish, and just, I just smiled and go, man, this, like my trip was complete at that point. Just to see the Lord answer that prayer in that short amount of time. And look, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a big prayer, right? But I felt that it meant something then. And so, yeah, it's a joy. It's a privilege because here's what I love about compassion and what our leadership says. Like, we believe in what we're doing with the local church in 29 countries, serving children from poverty, releasing them from poverty in Jesus' name. Like, we believe it. I believe it's a great fit for every church. You find a better organization on the planet that does what we do as an organization, and I'll support them too. But at the end of the day, we invite pastors on these trips to serve them, to give them retreat and rest, and we're going to present it. And I've got a bit of a sales background after my time in youth ministry, and so, look, I'm not afraid. I'm going to ask you to consider what it would be like for your church to partner with Compassion. But it is so open-handed of saying, if this is a good fit for you, for your people, man, we can make something really great happen. We can help connect your people to a child in poverty and really bring missions to the kitchen table. And but we're open-handed in it, saying this is what we offer. If what you walk away from is rest and you connect so that you can connect with the Lord, connect with nature, and you are able to continue on how the Lord has called you in your place of ministry, man, praise the Lord. Then that's time well spent. It's money well spent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got to do all kind of stuff on that the trip. There's opportunity not just to fish, but you're in Wyoming. There's lots of cowboy hats and lots of horses. I did not. I grew up with horses, and so like it's not that novel for me to go on a horse ride. It's a lot more work. I still kind of see the work, the work in it. You got to do all that leading up to and afterwards. So it wasn't as appealing to me. And when I was going this time, I'm like, dude, I'm gonna fish. I'm gonna fish until there's grooves in my fingers from the line I'm stripping in. I'm
yes,
gonna
and
fish
amen.
and fish and fish And I did. And mission
Yes, you did.
accomplished. Mission accomplished. Because I'm also learning that the amount of fish you catch is directly impacted by the amount of times your line is in the water.
Amazing how
Directly
that happens.
proportionate.
So for me, I have to fish a lot.
Man, I didn't catch a thing at the office today.
No.
No.
But man, it was cool to see, to see guys, that have never done that, And I did the last time I was there, I went on one of the trips. The only reason I went there, were like, we're going to fish at the end of the ride or at the middle of the ride, and then before we come back. So I was like, oh, I'll do that. I get to go fish. So, but this time I didn't go ride. But Josh, you went on one of the horse rides. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Chase has mentioned there was no cell service at the ranch, and so I
Oh, that's right. There is cell service. There is, and that's one of the lures to get people to go on the horse ride.
yes, and I forgot to put my out of office response on, and where it may not have been that big of a deal, but I don't like for a week to go by before I respond to emails, and so I was like, I really need to go on this horseback ride. I would like to see it. It's probably been 35 years since I've been on a horse. Grew up in the country and had friends with them, and so I rode them. But it's been a minute. I'm not a very limber guy. I like to work out, but I don't do yoga and I don't stretch a good bit. So I said, I'm going to go. One of the pastors I invited was going to go to. I said, well, it'd be more time on the trail with Don. So we go out and they put me on this horse, and I mean, as soon as I straddle that thing, I feel my hip flexor just kind of pinch down a little bit, and it's kind of like, I hope that's going to stretch out. I think it will. It did not, and it's about an hour and a half one way up and an hour and a half down. It's quite the trip, and so on the way up, it's been a minute. Well, so it's been a minute since I rode a horse, and they tell you as you're going up the hill, lean forward, help the horse out. If you lean back, it's kind of pulling at the horse, and to help the horse out. Well, okay. So, but on the way down, you're to lean back as the horse is stepping down. So we get to the top of the mountain, and I needed to get off that horse. My hip was on fire. It was beautiful. I got my cell service. I put my out of office on, got a flood of text messages, but my hip was on fire. And I was like, I need to get off this horse. But I was afraid that if I got off, I wouldn't get back on it. Like, I'm not a very tall guy. And so I endured, and then we went back down. And I tell you, every step that horse took on the way down, it just pinched down on that hip, and it was just
And you're leaning back.
Every step, leaning back, trying to get relief. I never found it, and we finally, but it really didn't. And so we get back to the stable, and I can't move. I can't move my legs. Like from my waist down, both my hips are just like seized up. And the young lady was trying to help us, and I mean, the guys got a good laugh at it, and I mean, it's a funny story, but I didn't know what to do, and so she's like, kind of like, I couldn't even swing my leg off the back end of the horse. Like I had to go, like almost fall off, go the front way, and just slide off the horse. And I didn't know if my legs were going to work. I was like, I'm hoping that they remember and they do their job, and and thankfully they did. But I mean, it was like a cartoon. You see a character of his legs just bowed out, like when he gets off a horse, and I could barely walk. And the guys like they're laughing. There's three other pastors, and I was laughing to prevent from crying. I was in so much pain. And then they were like, you sure held it together pretty good. I was like, well, the last thing I want to do is ruin your horse. That's the always being on part, right? It's like, I didn't want to ruin your horse ride. And so I'm suffering in silence. But man, they helped me. There's a step up out of the stable. And I mean, I felt like a grandpa, man, but they helped me up and walking a few steps, loosening them up a little bit. I thought I'd be down for the next day.
What?
Oh man!
Like, why are you crying? Why are you crying and sweating, Josh? It's just so beautiful.
It was fine, but yeah, we all got a good laugh out of that. Well, they got a good laugh out of it. the next day, and I was like, the only way I'm getting back on a horse is if somebody's got to carry me out of this valley, and you're going to put me up there like I'm a dead body. I'm not saddling a horse again.
Drape him over the hind end.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh man, that's rough.
Gosh,
But
man.
you made it. But you made it.
I did make it, but I won't do it again.
So Chase, can we kind of come back to some of your things going on?
Yeah.
So when you're man, like let's talk about the what maybe I think you talked a little bit about earlier about kind of some of the spiritual things going through the Psalms. What are some of the things that you learned about yourself in this time of reflection and just kind of being removed from everything? And maybe what is something that you learned about God in this whole thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think when I started, I would just write down a bit each day about this little phrase in scripture. And I think a thing I learned about me is that I don't slow down enough. And we're going through a series called Formed by Jesus right now on the disciplines. And I'm talking about solitude and Sabbath this Sunday. And so the Lord rested, God rested from his work, but it was after 6 days of work. So I'm all for work. It's a good thing. But when I stopped, I woke up without an alarm and got up before breakfast, and I didn't have anything to do,
Mm,
which is a really amazing thing because there aren't many days where I wake up and I don't have something to do. And so, I mean, it's really evident in southern Wyoming, but God is there. And he's always there. He's there when I forget. He's there when I don't trust him. He's there when I need him. He's there when the most difficult days of ministry are happening. And he is very present. And so I stopped without a phone to distract me, without 7 meetings in a day, with being able to read whatever I wanted to and talk to the Lord about whatever I wanted to. There's a verse in Psalm that says, like a weaned child comes to his mother, we come to you. And it was one of these moments where there's really just a freedom of, I'm not coming for milk, I'm coming for intimacy. And there's just time to be with the Lord. And I think I read a guy or listened to a guy the other day said we all live like heart surgeons on call.
mm,
And, so I live like I don't have time to slow down, but really I think what that reminded me of is whether it's my morning wake up is 5 a.m. Whether it's here in that moment at this chair I'm sitting in, or whether it's another moment, I've got to stop and be still before the Lord and be in His presence. And sometimes that takes work, but it lands in rest. And it was, I mean, it's certainly worth it in southern Wyoming at Water Valley Ranch when you got, Patrick, the fishing guide and server who reminds you of Matthew McConaughey at age 21 taking care of you. But then that's true in the moments where I think I can't or don't have time. I've got to stop and remember that the Lord is there and that He's my helper, even when I forget it.
That's good.
what is it about we talk about it being the Sabbath being a time of rest. What does that look like to a pastor? Because you're working on Sundays, and a lot of times
Yeah.
pastors don't have the opportunity to rest on the Sabbath, typical Sabbath day.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about that as our team. I mean, Sunday is not going to be a day of rest for us, and there are people in church work who can forget that Sunday's a work day, and it is though, and it's good that it is. But so it's got to be another day, and so for me, I can say, as far as a day that doesn't happen weekly. I would like for it to, but it's seasonal life where that's doesn't happen weekly, but it does have to be intentional time where I think it's both for rest and for worship. I think the interesting thing about Sabbath, I think solitude and Sabbath are complements to fellowship, because there is a communal aspect to Sabbath, but then Sabbath is this 24-hour deal where it's not all communal. There's some time alone,
Mm.
at least in scripture. And I think traditionally for the people of God, I think it's often outdoors where you're not working, but you're walking
Mm,
maybe. And certainly for the Puritans, there was an element to solitude and quiet and Sabbath that involves seeing God as creator. And I can say for me, I think growing up in the church tradition I thought about Sabbath as something that came from the law, but it doesn't. The first time Sabbath is mentioned, or first time rest is mentioned, is really in Genesis 1. On the seventh day God rested, and it said he called that day holy and blessed,
mm,
because his work was finished. And so more in just kind of being a person who is made in the image of God, I'm trying to figure out, what does it look like to rest from the work, whether that happens every week or whether that happens every month. Because with a job, and then also just with young kids at home, it can go and go and go. Life can, but if sometimes it might be a moment in the day. Like there, one of the things Brad has kind of slowly talking me into is ditch fishing. There's a little ditch behind my
mm.
office that I've thought about, taking my fly rod up and hitting the bluegill in that ditch a little bit as a moment of solitude. But then Sabbath, I think it's both rest and focus on the Lord. And certainly when I'm teaching, I'm trying to focus on the Lord. I want that to be an act of worship. But I might also be thinking about somebody in the 10th row whose marriage is falling apart.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not really rest. And so um, I try to find days that are not a Sunday where I can slow down and sometimes be with the Lord in the book and sometimes be with the Lord in the outdoors, and
There's
just
a
experience his presence.
there's a rabbi. His name's Abraham Herschel. He said, "If you work with your hands, Sabbath with your mind. If you work with your mind, Sabbath with your hands." And I feel like that's pretty accurate. Like my job is not a manual labor job. It's
Yeah.
I'm working with my mind, but man, I find so much rest in having a that fly rod in my hand, cutting wood in the backyard, weeding in my garden, those types of things. I really get energy from those types of things. So what are some of your thoughts on that quote? Had you ever heard that?
I had not heard that quote, and I'd never heard of Heschel until this week. And I heard someone reference him, and read someone reference him kind of in a 24-hour span. And so his book came in today. It's in my backpack, and
How about that?
I'm busting it open in the morning. But I think yeah, that's right. That like my Uncle John, who's a real formative guy in my life, he worked with his hands, and so for him, a Sabbath was going to be a stillness for
Mm,
sure.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm in an office staring at a computer or a book, or talking with people. And so for me, it's going to be outdoors. And sometimes it can be with people. Like if I'm my wife or my boys and I'm outdoors, that is a good time for me. If
Yes.
I'm alone with the Lord outdoors, that is a time for me that is restful. Even like you say, even if I'm doing something,
mhm.
I might be plucking ears of grain, but that doesn't feel like work, right? Because Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Mm,
Mm, that's good. For me on that trip, I think back to you said something that resonated with me, Chase. Of like I woke up and I didn't have anything to do.
mm,
And I was like, usually whenever I go, fishing, I'm looking at my clock, going, all right, what time do I need to be finished today? We weren't looking at the clock. We were looking at when does the sun go? When is it too dark
Yeah.
to keep fishing? That was our time of finishing on that trip. But man, days just like time felt different there on that trip because of that, because we weren't looking at our watches or our phones, and
Mhm.
it made me feel like there's real rest or there's real Sabbath. I don't know if it's Herschel or not, but remember Eugene Peterson quoting a rabbi about Sabbath, and he talked about what the temple did to space, Sabbath does to time. And I
Yeah.
thought about that on that trip of like, this is real Sabbath, because I have virtually no concept of what time it is, because I'm not worried about time. I'm just like where I am, enjoying the place that I am and the people that I'm with. And I don't have to. I mean, the time is, it's helpful. And we certainly need a good schedule, and I need a good schedule. And, we didn't wake up with our alarms. We woke up when we woke up, and that was incredible. And so, man, it was good. I mean, it was genuine rest when you're not really looking at the clock going, where do I have to be next? Right. Pretty
Yeah,
rare,
and that
pretty rare.
I think it's Comer in a Garden City that references something similar, that he says that's one of the things that distinguishes Christianity from every other religion. And for Hinduism, there's a Ganges River, and for Islam, you got Mecca. It's a space. For Judaism, it would have been the temple until
Yeah.
Rome came through in AD 70. But for us, for believers in Christ and followers of Jesus, it's time. And really, ultimately, he is our rest. The rest for the people of God is found in Jesus.
That's good. Josh, we got you back, looks like.
Yeah, I think so.
What you said you had not caught a fish all week, but you did catch a fish, didn't you?
I did, and that's the part of that tension. Brian, I know you had asked, what I do. So when I'm on, I'm there to serve the pastors. I want to make sure that they're having the best time, that they're
Right.
resting, that they're catching fish, and that's the tension. And the byproduct is I get to do that. Brad, you mentioned some other trips. We take guys pheasant hunting. I'm not a hunter, really not a fisherman either. Occasionally, I'll hit a bird when nobody else is around, but on those trips. But fishing, it just seemed to be kind of the same way. I just I was trying to learn, and we had some really good guides, and trying to figure some things out. Brad was gracious to give me some tips before and even between, and I've been on the White River. We took pastors to the White River, and
Mm.
a lot different float. Yeah, amazing. I caught a couple browns, and it was a great time. But you got somebody, kind of felt like when you were a kid, he was baiting the hook and like, all right, do this, do that. It was doing all the work for you, which hey, that's fine. It was fun and caught fish, but man, just had a hard time. I didn't really fish much on Wednesday, but on Thursday went with Rick, and he caught his fish, and we were just about done. And he was kind of tired. You're out there all day, and I said, I'm going to go give it one more go, just not close to not far from the cabin there. And Brad's coming in, and Brad, when he says he fished as much as he could, like he was there to fish, and I mean he was the first one out, usually the last one coming back. And so we crossed past each other, and I could tell he was tired, and so I just made my way. There's a little swing bridge across the river, and I just got up from there and was just trying to, if I could net anything, it was, or even hook one at that point. And then I hear a rustle behind me, and here comes Brad, and he's like, "Man, I just wanted to spend some time with you." And so it was a great moment, and he was there teaching me. If you guys have never seen Brad in action, I mean, it's a thing of beauty, and just his ability to put that fly anywhere he wants it. Like I've never seen anything like it.
A beautiful
And
cast
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
absolutely. And so he was like, "All right, hey, go here, do this, line this," and just helping me tremendously. And yeah, I really just enjoyed that time together, Brad. I mean, it's you mentioned we're friends, been friends for a long time. Something you love so much, and just to be able to be in that environment with you, it's not the thing. I'm probably not going to take my own personal time and go fly fishing, and but I enjoyed it, and I just love being there with you in that moment. And as the Lord would have it, on one of the probably last times I'm ready to be done, and just we've been out there a few minutes. Man, I hooked one, and it's not even in your traditional. I didn't throw it up and it floated down, and I saw the fish. It was on my back cast, like I was trying to wet cast it and was about
Yeah,
to
it was
throw
on
it
the
up.
swing. It was on the swing, Brian.
Oh man. Oh,
And I was like, oh, what? I thought I hit a rock, which is silly because it's a fly, but I don't fly fish a
Old
lot.
rockfish.
Yeah. And so when I slung that thing, thinking I was caught on a rock, that fish, it came up out of the water, and Brad got the net. And man, it was just special to the
Yeah,
one fish I caught for it to be when you and I were together and you were helping me. It was something that
that
I'll
was good.
remember, very special.
And that river is beautiful, and it was it was pretty quick that week. They had snow melt, and so snow was melting, and the water was moving pretty fast, but it was coming down. And the other thing, Brian, you've experienced this many times before, as you walk through those trees down into that river, you descend into that cold water. Even though you have waders on, it's still you can feel how cold it is. But man, that white noise from the river, just drowns everything out. The sound of that rushing water is literally is a white noise, like a noise machine that a lot of people go to sleep to, right? A lot of people use those kinds of machines. And even in our cabins, if you had your window
Mhm.
open, even in our cabins, you could hear that, just that beautiful noise of a mountain river, right outside our windows. And the mountains were sort of high around us. We were down in a kind of a narrow valley, and so the mountains were high around us. And man, it was it's a really special place. If you've never been to Wyoming, it's worth a trip out there to see, because it's very it's so different than Alabama or Texas, right, Chase?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it is just vastly different than anything. It's even different, has a different feel than a Montana, Brian. It's special, its own special feel,
mm.
but a beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah, it
So,
was amazing.
Brad, so what is, we've talked to, Josh's experience and Chase's experience, but you were on this thing too. So what was something that you were able to reflect on or to take away personally? I mean, I'm hearing you're over there ministering to Josh, and Josh is ministering to everybody else. I mean, I know that you can't turn off being a pastor. It's not something. It's who you are, not what you do. And
Yeah.
so where were you in this? What was your headspace? Where did God take you as far as showing you about Himself?
I mean, I think those glimmers of realizing, gosh, I lost track of time, and that how special that was, and how rare that is in my life, that I lose track of time, and and a whole day has gone by, and you haven't looked at what time it is. You kind of looked up at the sun and saying about where it is in the sky, but that's about as close as I got to checking the time.
Hmm.
And you know, at every turn in a place that's beautiful, I would stop in awe at. I mean, there's one hike where you hike out of you cross this, Robinson Crusoe kind of bridge. It's a rope bridge, and it's kind of bouncing, and you're kind of walking across the river, and you kind of get in rhythm as the bridge bounces, and you make it across the river. And then you take a left and you go up the mountain. And this is when you're hiking back into some of the backwater into this national forest. And Chase, if you remember, I'm struggling. It's we're several thousand
Oh,
feet above sea level. We're breathing
and you
pretty
and you
hard.
go, yeah, and I think our elevation then we went about 1,000 feet up from there, and then over a mile back in. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But we went up, and trees, disappear, and you look down, and it's desert like, and they're little tiny little flowers, and nothing's higher than 12 inches off the ground probably, and there are rocks, and it's desert like. And then we
Mhm.
followed that little trail on that kind of ridge, and then it descended down into this little valley. And as we went down, there's a stand of aspen trees
Mhm.
and evergreens, and this is in the middle of the summer, and there's a little creek down there. The temperature changed by like 15 degrees probably, and we broke into these trees, and all of a sudden it feels like tropical because it's so green and it's cool. And we were just like 100 yards that way, we were just in the desert,
Mhm.
and there's no trees, and now there's trees of a different kind, and it's all green, and there's ferns, and there's flowers and there's aspen trees and they're quaking. If you've ever seen the aspen, you know, they're the quaking aspen because when the wind blows, their leaves tremble like the ground's trembling, and it's so beautiful and they're green. And in the fall, they're beautiful. They're like a bright orange yellow, incredible. But they're green because we're in the midst of summer, and then we hike out of there and we hike up a little bit, and now there's a whole different ecology, of pine trees and ponderosa pines and evergreens, and it's a totally different set of plant life. It's incredible within the span of what was it, 2 miles at most,
Yeah.
not even that.
Yeah.
And so you just marvel at the complexity of creation. I wanted to take a picture of every little flower because they were all so different and they're beautiful. And then you're wondering what's around the bend. Hey bear, hey mountain lion, what are you going to see? Are you going to jump a deer? And just like around every corner, I'm, in expectation of something, stupendous, and it's incredible and it's beautiful. And so like my heart was super full with being in a place like that, that's so far from home. And it was, so adventurous. And then you go back to the cabin, and there's a full body taxidermy mountain lion, and, the sobering reminder that there was probably one of those watching you the whole time you were taking pictures of flowers, ready to eat you. Right.
Yeah.
But man, it was incredible. So,
What's in mountain lion poop? Well, cameras and flowers.
Cameras and flowers, a little red
That's
beard.
right.
A little red beard, bits of beard. But yeah, heart was full. And then probably, my favorite thing is in the evening, in June, it's cool enough to have a fire.
Yeah.
And all, so in the background, you have that sound of the mountain river. The stars are brighter than you've ever seen them because there's no light pollution. And there's faces all around of pastors, of guys that go through what you go through every day. And we're all sitting around the fire, and their faces are lit up by the warm glow of a fireplace. And we're all sitting around talking and fellowship and just the fragrance of worship, and just a sweet aroma, as I will say. And if anyone knows me, they know what that fragrance and that aroma is. And it's a sweet aroma unto the Lord. And man, it was a good time, and heart was full, and I'm thankful to have been there. But very rarely do I not look at my watch. And so it was a real blessing to not ever look down at the old watch and go, I have to be somewhere. Nope. I fished until my heart's content. I promise. I milked every second.
Man, what a great opportunity, and what a great ministry that is to pastors. I mean, what Compassion is doing, the Refuge, and it's like, I can't imagine I don't know who started it, but you got to think it's somebody who's experienced what being a pastor's like, and knowing that what that need is for people to get away, not have to worry about who's going to sit in the pulpit, not going to have to worry about who's going to go minister to someone at the hospital back home. I mean, a true time to refuel, and reconnect, yeah. Wow. What a great opportunity. And thanks for all that you guys are doing, Josh, with that.
That's Brian, that's it. That the guy that started it was a pastor, and some guys took him fly fishing, and it changed his life. They got him away, and that was his heart. That's how he started Refuge.
That's awesome. Yeah. That is so cool.
Well, Josh,
go ahead,
Brian.
No, I think you were going to say the same thing as me. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have our plan. I just wanted to hear from Josh on. We've had, those of you that are longtime listeners have listened and heard the legendary Wes Stafford share his story. Man, what a treasure that man is, and how he's given his life to do what he's done with compassion and building compassion. And just, man, I will forever treasure that conversation that we had with Wes on this podcast, and I'm thankful that it'll be there. You know, it's recorded and we can go back and enjoy that. So if you have not listened to Dr. Stafford's episode, please go back and do yourself a favor and hear from Dr. Stafford and hear his heart for this work. But Josh, man, can you share a little bit about what compassion does, and more importantly, how people can, if they're listening and think, I mean, I want to be a part of that, how can they join up and be a part of sponsorship?
Yeah, and I'll just say, please do listen to that podcast. Wes Stafford is one of the most amazing men on the face of the planet, and the stories and that he has to share. I mean, it's phenomenal. Brad, you mentioned, I don't know, with the internet issues, what will come through, but my wife got involved with Compassion First as a volunteer advocate. And we were invited to Colorado a couple times over the years before working for Compassion, and got to meet Dr. Stafford. And that man, in the celebrating Compassion's 60th anniversary over 11 years ago, we were introduced to him. And he sat and talked with Paige and me for 15 minutes, undistracted, not looking to see who the next person is, in a room full of very important people. He was zoned in to us, with us, and just present with us. And it just meant the world to us. And so he's the real deal. Every bit of who you think he is, he absolutely is. A few years ago, I walked into the hunting lodge in South Dakota, and Wes Stafford was on that trip. And I was fanboying, just unbelievable that I was able to be there with him. Such a legend. Under Dr. Stafford's leadership, we saw the ministry take off from serving about 800,000 kids to the 2.2-ish that we're serving now, 2.2 million around the world in a very short amount of time. And it really comes back to what even he shares about, is the decision to double down on what we do in the name of Jesus. And so Compassion is about releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. And to do that, we work with the local church, with indigenous pastors, to help them disciple children that are often not even seen and certainly not heard from in the world that we live in. You take the poor and poor children, and they become the most marginalized people on the planet. And so, man, we work in 29 different countries. We just expanded to 4 new countries, actually re-entered into Myanmar, which was formerly Burma, within the last year. And so those 2.3 million children, they're real kids that are represented. They were, part of families that are connected to that community, that ultimately they need hope. And there's a great study that was done by a guy named Dr. Bruce Waddick at San Francisco University. He's an economics professor. And they did empirical evidence to determine the effectiveness of sponsorship. And it's on our website, compassion.com. You can check that out, read the full thing. But it's overwhelmingly definitive that sponsorship works. It changes the course of a child's life. But the coolest thing from that study was they talked about hope, is that when kids become part of the sponsorship program, they begin to have hope and a better future. And he said, how do you really articulate that? And one of the coolest things I've ever seen is they asked children that weren't sponsored, that were living in abject poverty, less than $3 a day, to draw themselves in the rain. And those kids drew themselves with no protection. They were downcast. The picture was gloomy. And that was them in the rain. And then they asked kids that were in the sponsorship program, connected to a local church, to draw themselves in the rain. The images were bright. You could see the sun. They had covering. Some of them drew an umbrella. Some of them drew them inside. And there was a countenance of joy and happiness on their faces. So Dr. Waddick's like, this is what we're offering. How do you measure that? But you give kids hope for something better, and man, it can absolutely change the world. And we see that, man. There are young adults that are world-renowned neurosurgeons. I had the privilege this weekend of spending time with a young man from the Dominican Republic. He used to make musical instruments with plastic bottles and a microphone. And what drew him to the local church was kids singing with the real microphone. And just had an article written by a Dominican newspaper that said Jesus called him through a microphone. And so now he's a worship pastor. Those 10 friends they used to play music with, Adam was the only sponsored kid in the program at his local church. But when he got a letter from his sponsor, his friend said, Adam, read the letter for us. And those young men took those words of encouragement that a Sunday school class wrote to Adam on a regular basis, and they took it on as their encouragement. All 10 of those young men are followers of Jesus, and they're worship pastors around the world to this day. So, man, the work that Compassion does to release children from poverty in Jesus' name, the holistic development, not only taking care of the physical, the mental, the socio-emotional, but the spiritual poverty that plagues children. Man, it's a joy to be a part of. I hope I get to do this the rest of my life. And so, Brad, you asked how can people be a part of it? Well, one, if you go to a church, I would love for you to go talk to your pastor. We have a group of men and women all over the country that we get to serve churches, like in my role. And we would love to partner with churches and help connect them with the community, help them connect with the church. But you can simply go to compassion.com and you can sponsor a kid today and know that the difference you're making in a child's life, well, you won't know. And that's the cool thing. I think on the other side of eternity, the Lord will give us that time to sit and hear those stories. Like we're sharing stories, like we'll get to hear those stories of what a simple letter to a kid says, I love you. God loves you. He has a plan for you. You just have no idea the impact that you can make in a kid's life.
That's awesome. We'll make sure to have those links on the show notes too. So make it super easy for people to click and find out more about Compassion and what they do. I love it.
Awesome.
Thanks for sharing that. What's Josh, for you? One of our final questions we always ask, what's your next adventure? I know you have lots of adventures on the horizon.
Yeah, there's two that I'd love to briefly mention. One, my son, he's 17, he's a senior, he loves the outdoors. And so we're actually going to do an Alaskan trip. We're going to spend a few days in the Northwest, see the Cascade Mountains and Mount Olympia. So super excited about that in May. But my very next adventure, Brad, you mentioned that these trips to fish and other opportunities kind of came out of COVID when we couldn't take pastors to see our work. I'm actually taking a church from Jackson, Mississippi to go down and visit a couple of churches that they help partner with and sponsor kids at in Colombia. And so We'll be flying into Bogota, spending a few days there. The coolest part, like, again, I'm here to help the church, but my boss and others have made it possible that I'm actually going to get to meet one of our sponsor kids, Abraham, that we sponsor in Colombia. So really, really thrilled about that.
That's, super exciting.
That's so cool.
Incredible.
That's awesome stuff.
Chase, what's on the horizon for Chase Bowers' next adventure?
Yeah. So, I just got back from kind of a nice one, dropped my son in London to go to Bible school at Cape and Ray Hall, and got back about a week ago from that. But on the horizon, my wife just kind of out of the blue about 2 weeks ago said on spring break, what do you think about taking our two youngest sons to Broken Bow? So in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, there's a ton of trails, and then there's a fishery where there's just a variety of species. There's trout, there's bass. And so over spring break, we're looking to go up there and do some fishing, do some hiking, and have a great time with our two youngest in the outdoors.
That's exciting. I've never been. That sounds cool. I've heard about that, but I've never been there before.
Yeah, same for us. It's like 4 hours away. We've never been there, and so we're going to check it out.
That's cool. You mentioned one of the guys, and it made me think of a story I would love for you to tell from the trip, Chase. You mentioned our boy Patrick, and there was a fantastic story about our friend Patrick, one of the young men that was a guide for the Refuge Foundation.
Yeah. Are you talking about we're driving in and we're just talking? Yeah. Patrick is my drive, and we're going in, and I look over at one of the pastors riding with me, and Patrick's just got this great iconic drawl. And I said, it's like Matthew McConaughey. He's 21 years old. And I asked him how he landed out there, and he told me, and I said, what do you do? And so he mentioned he liked to write, and my son Nate is a gifted writer. And so I was talking back and forth, and I said, well, Patrick, how do you do that? What does that look like? And Patrick goes, I don't really plan it. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, Chase, I don't ever really sit down to write, but sometimes writing sits me down. You know what I mean? I went,
all right.
Matthew Matthew McConaughey at age 21 is in the building, and we just laugh. But he wrote a lot about nature, a lot about the Lord, and he was a great guy, great conversationalist, and served people so well. Just such a free spirit and fun guy who loved the Lord. It'd be exciting to see what God does with Patrick.
Absolutely, yeah. I had a great time with Patrick myself. All those young men were incredible that worked there. I was super impressed with the staff that they put together for the Refuge. And speaking of support, if there's if this kind of work inspires you and you want to be a part of that, you can support the Refuge Foundation. Is because they're they're fundraised, supported, and so they offer weekends like this to pastors that. All you have to pay is getting yourself there. If you can't pay anything, they really have a real heart for pastors, and they do incredible work. And so if you want to support that, we'll have those links also in the show notes to support the Refuge Foundation. Well, this has been, man, what a great conversation, fellas. I was looking forward to sitting down with you two. I remembered some specific stories that, man, I thought were worth telling, and experiences that were worth sharing with our folks with the Storied Outdoors. And I'm so thankful that you've joined us, man.
Man, thanks for having us. It's such just a great, great gift to see y'all's faces, hear your voices, and visit and remember that trip.
Man, Josh, so nice to meet you, man. And Chase, always is good to see you too, but I wish it could be face to face and shoulder to shoulder throwing a fly rod,
Oh yeah.
So
we need to do that again.
But man, thank you all for joining us. This has been so great. And I know that people are going to be really encouraged by this conversation and entertained too. I don't know what it is, but I keep feeling like my hips are going to lock up on me any minute now.
That's great.
Well, you learn. I think about all the little lessons that I learned too. I was so deeply thankful that I had stayed on the trail that day, and I didn't follow. I didn't go down the hill with Paul.
No, don't follow the wrong guy.
I'd have been in real trouble because I was tired. I was just exhausted. I'm like, you know what, man, I'm going back.
Yeah.
And I was really glad that I did because it might not have worked out so great for me. So stay on the trail, folks. Stay on the trail, folks.
Learning lessons. So Paul's my boss. He works for Compassion, and so it gives me a little caution whenever Paul's like, "Hey, our team should do this." But I don't know, Paul. I saw you lead some guys into some rough water.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I know your ways.
Right. They usually end up with waders full of water.
Yeah.
Which turns into an anchor, by the way.
That's right. Yes. Sheer panic.
Man, that's the thing I love about this podcast and about stories like this is there really are great lessons anytime you go on an adventure in the outdoors. There are things that you never forget, and things that will teach you life lessons, and genuinely, I enjoy sharing those stories and spending time to reflect on our experiences. That's what we hope this story or these podcasts do for people is to, one, inspire them to get outside. But two is take time to reflect on your experiences, especially those in the outdoors, so that you can stop and write them down. Maybe you'll be like Patrick. Maybe you need to stop and sit down and write because you don't normally sit down and write, but every time you write, it stops you. So that'd be really great for us to put that into action, is to sit down, write these stories, share some adventures in the place we love to call the Storied Outdoors.